I don't want to share someone else's thoughts. I want to create my own original thoughts. I want to create my own original solutions. I want to look at situations and come up with my own phrasing, my own words, and do it my way.
This is the Jon Taffer Podcast.
Shut it down!
Well, hello, everybody. Who's getting snowed on right now? Almost everybody's getting their ass kicked with winter, Corey.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's a nice sunny day here in Las Vegas. Not too bad. A little windy.
It is, yeah.
But to our friends down in Texas, our thoughts are with you. And to our friends who are getting slammed right now across the country, some of the coldest, worst weather ever. I can't believe in Texas it was almost 0. And it was 20 degrees warmer in Alaska.
Sure.
So, crazy weather. But hello, everybody. My name is Jon Taffer. Welcome to the Jon Taffer Podcast. So we start Bar Rescue next week. And we are digging in deep. So we've got great, when you do a season like Bar Rescue, especially post-pandemic, and we've never done anything like this before, Corey, but I'm proud to say that we're back in production, even considering the COVID situation. We've put in all sorts of COVID-safe policies, et cetera, obviously, to get back to production. But, this is an interesting year, Corey. It's almost like an entire season of hurricane episodes. Right, it's a little different because not all these owners created their own failure. In some cases, they are responsible. They didn't have the money. They didn't have this. They didn't put money into it when they should have. Now they're screwed, and other people are beating them. And then, there could be a million reasons why owners or employees or people are still responsible for the situation we're in COVID even. So it'll be a fascinating episode for me. But going into it, we did some really smart stuff. I took all my technology partnerships from Taffer's Tavern, and when we developed Taffer's Tavern this year, we worked with all of the cooking technology companies, bar technology companies, all the computer technology companies, transactional technology companies. So I'm bringing all this new tech to Bar Rescue this season. So I'm pretty excited about it, Corey. Pretty cool technologies and stuff we're dealing with this year. Also, a little different from this year is that I can't necessarily be as angry at the owner as I would normally be, or put as much blame on the owner as I normally would. So it's a different way of producing Bar Rescue, and I'm really looking forward to it this season. So we start filming season 8 soon. Season 8 is now scheduled to premiere either late April or early May. I guess network will figure that out. Of course, we'll let everybody know. And I think it's going to be a very special season of Bar Rescue. So, Corey, the first one I start this season for season 8 is the 196th episode.
I was just going to ask, which one's going to be the 200?
So 4 episodes, I might be off one. Maybe it's 195, 196. But The 4th or 5th episode in is the big 200.
Nice.
And I might have mentioned this before on this podcast, but it's a milestone for me. I'm an old Yankee fan, and sometimes I look at Reggie Jackson's social media pages, and Reggie hit 3 home runs in one day. It was called Mr. October. And, when you look at Brady and his football records, or Tiger and his golf records, or anybody, a salesman for a computer company who has the highest records, and the CEO who drove the stock the highest. And, there are certain things in life that are sort of measurable, Corey, and they measure sort of our staying power, or our depth, or our gut, or our aggressiveness, or our assertiveness, or our knowledge. But things, these milestones that people like a Tiger achieves, or an Einstein achieves, to pick a different spectrum, they're special. And there's measurements in life where we actually do get to measure ourselves and sit back and be relative and give ourselves that pat on the back when we deserve it, or understand that we fell short and maybe we don't deserve that pat on the back. But, there are certain measurements in life that are pretty significant. This year I crossed 20 years of marriage with Nicole. That's pretty significant to me.
Congrats.
And she doesn't hate me.
That's a big milestone.
But there are certain things in life that are measurable, and 200 episodes in the TV world is pretty freaking measurable. It's a milestone that very few shows achieve. So I'm pretty excited about it. And obviously, we're going to work really hard to make this season a special season. So we'll see you back with new Bar Rescue episodes later this season. So Taffer's Tavern, we started construction in Washington, D.C., and we'll release more information as that goes on. But you know what's interesting, Corey, is when I finish this podcast, I'm sitting in my studio. I have not sat in this studio since March of last year, Corey, right?
Oh, yeah, you haven't.
We haven't, together.
Yeah.
Now, you've been here, of course, working on your own.
Yeah, I've been in and out. Yeah.
And we set up the studio in my house. So Corey, for this past year, has maintained his personal safety so that he and I could continue working together, and has been coming to my house and producing our podcasts and our network promos and our keynotes and our V-notes and all the work that we've done this year, we've done from my home, either my home theater or my home bar. And Corey, buddy, to sit back here, and I got to take a second and just say thank you for everything that we've been through together this year. It has been a beast.
I appreciate you, John. I thank you.
So when I'm finished with this podcast, for the first time since I believe March 8th, I am going to stand up, Corey. I'm going to walk out of this studio, and I'm going to walk into my office and sit in my chair, which I haven't done since freaking March 8th of last year.
That's crazy.
Which was the beginning of the last episode we shot for Bar Rescue, and March 13th is when whammo, they shut us down, and that was that. And so I've gotten my vaccines. Thank you to the state of Nevada and for the various qualifications and such, and it isn't hard in the state of Nevada to get a vaccine. There's many locations people can go to, and you got to just do your homework in your individual states. I know some of you are younger, some of you don't qualify yet than others, but you got to watch. Also, you got to look for people who don't show up. Maybe there's canceled appointments. Maybe there's walk-ups. So I know people that just went to the testing facilities without appointments and just waited, and they got free slots. So, we have to be assertive to make this happen for ourselves. And I'm fortunate. I was able to get the second vaccine. So in another few days, Corey, I'm going to actually still maintain safe policies, because 1 out of 20 people the vaccine doesn't work for, and there's still things that can happen. You know what I'm saying, Corey? So
of course, yeah.
We still got to be safe, but there's that safety net now. So I can come back to my office, and I can function here with new COVID requirements. And, we can produce a television show with new COVID safety standards. And, we can go back to doing podcasts, again, with new COVID safety standards. And we couldn't have said that 2 months ago.
No.
So on this very podcast, Corey, I made a comment and said that I thought things would really start to turn and change in March and April, right?
Yeah, you did. Mm-hmm.
And here it is, end of February, call it March.
Yeah.
And Nevada is now opening up the size of restaurants to 35% in casinos. I understand that's right on the horizon. Other states are starting to loosen. Hospital numbers have gone down for many days in a row, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
These trends, that's a big deal. So if hospitalizations continue to fall, then, second, third week in March, we're going to start to see some significant differences. And we're going to start to see dropping hospital numbers and more increased vaccine numbers. And son of a gun, Corey, our forecasting throughout this whole thing might hold up to be pretty bulletproof.
It's been pretty on point so far.
So we'll see if we're right. By the end of March, or call it April 1, we should feel that more people are going to work and restaurants are opening up and things are starting to happen. And, man, that's a pretty exciting thought to have. So last month, as all my regular listeners know, we moved the podcast to monthly rather than weekly. And the reason for that is I'm back in production for Bar Rescue, and it's very, very difficult to get the podcast done each week while we're shooting the show. That's how intense Bar Rescue is, by the way. It's what I call invasive, Corey. It's 24 hours a freaking day. Yeah. Between picking bar stools and wallpaper and paints and designs and getting technology figured and menus done and orders done and working with my experts and working with the production teams, it is completely immersive isn't even the word. It's invasive. When you're in the production of Bar Rescue, for me, it just never ends. Because we remodel at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, Corey. If I don't respond to those texts at 2 in the morning
right.
for my team on site, they're at a standstill. So I'm in 24-hour immersive mode. So it's very difficult to do the podcast weekly. So we're going to be doing it monthly. We're still going to bring on great guests and have the same kind of conversations that we've had now. And post-production, we'll look at bringing it back more frequently again. But thank you all for being here. And, when we look at the first few podcasts that we did this year, we were focusing on resolutions and, what can we do to deal with what's going on. And, for me, I thought the vaccine, we'd all get vaccinated and we'd just go back on the street and I wouldn't have to wear a mask again, Corey, and I'm back inside restaurants. And, that's sort of not true.
Yeah.
So, you get the vaccine and you still go back home. You're still not piling into restaurants. And many people are still, even post-vaccine, not getting their old lives quite back. So for me, I think about a year ago, and I wonder how many of you have been through this. I think about a year ago saying that, wow, I can't wait to this vaccine. I can't wait for this vaccine. And for those first few months, there was no certainty at all that we'd even get a vaccine, Corey, nonetheless when.
Yeah.
And then they started saying maybe by the end of the year, maybe by the end of the year. And wow, that sounded promising. Excuse me, Corey. That sounded promising. They said by the end of the year, and that sounded promising, Corey. So I said, okay, so maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel. Then, son of a gun, we got to the end of the year in October, November, and they made it clear it was coming by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And son of a gun, we had it by the end of the year. And then hundreds of millions of doses went out. And so I thought that, wow, that's going to be the complete end of this. And I sort of saw it as black and white. In COVID is black, and then you get your vaccine and you step back into the white of the world. You know what I mean? And into the light rather than the darkness is probably a better way to put it. So, or from captivity to no captivity might be even a better way to put it. But my point is that there is no absolution. There is no moment when you say, okay, I can go out there again. Fuck it, I'm good.
Right.
Right, Corey? I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to wash my hands. No, that's just not the case. And we don't know if we can carry it with the vaccine or not and infect others still. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But I really thought months ago that I'd get the vaccine and run out and start partying, Corey, and seeing everybody who I miss so much.
When do you think that is?
Well, talking to the medical professionals that I have the honor to work with, and we're even talking with a number of doctors right now, psychologists, working on my new book about the psychological and physiological impact of conflict, emotional conflict and unresolved issues and things like that. But talking with the doctors, when the new cases, right now we're sitting at about, if we took a study in many states, new cases, if we tested everybody, would be sitting at about 10, 12% right now. In some places 15, maybe a tad higher, a tad lower. Of course, that's sort of a local statement.
Right.
When that number gets down to about 5%, oh, we're good. And it's not who's vaccinated, it's the amount of people that are going to the hospitals. So people might say, well, shoot, John, we're 12%. We got to get all the way down to 5. We were up at like 30 there for a while in certain places. Yeah. So we've come a significant way down. Now, with more people getting vaccinated and more people getting it candidly, right, and having the antibodies naturally, those numbers are now, for the first time, Corey, we're seeing hospitalization numbers go down. So if those numbers continue to go down these next few weeks, I suggest by the end of March, early April, we could be in a very, very good place. Now, I'm guessing the governors are not going to be so quick to react. So when those numbers come down, they'll start easing back in restrictions, or easing out restrictions, I should say, and then see what happens with the numbers before they give it a free-for-all is what I'm guessing will happen. And states are different. I'm guessing California will still have serious regulations of some way, whereas a state like Florida won't. But I don't want to get into the politics of that discussion. But the fact of the matter is, I think by summer, Corey, I think we're going to be in a pretty good place.
Yeah.
That's my goal. And when you think of here in Las Vegas, there's this buzz in the big gaming companies about May 1 being a significant date. That May 1 pools will start to open again, and the hotels will start to repop open more restaurants, and the destination of Las Vegas will more come to life. But what's interesting? Being non-political, the statistics of COVID are fascinating. How, for example, New York had such horrendous COVID numbers with such heavy restrictions, and California too in many places within the state. But yet how Florida, with unrestricted and the beach parties and all the stuff in the end, didn't have that statistical numbers. So, when they say it's the science, follow the science. A year later, Corey, I'm not sure they still understand this thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
And it seems to me that being distant from each other, sure, is going to eliminate my chance of spreading it to you, of course. And wearing a mask, sure, it's like having a piece of fabric between us. I'm guessing if I stand on one side of a drapery and you stand on the other, that probably there's a lesser chance that whatever comes out of my mouth is going to go up your nose. So I think that these logical things certainly make a difference. But we've learned this thing, sort of has a mind of its own. And it has a way of invading our lives, and it's gotten pretty close to me. It hasn't gotten me, but it's gotten one step away from me. And almost everybody in this office got it, except for you, Corey. Right?
I know.
You're the only one.
Yeah.
Almost every person in this office got it this year. My VP, Chief of Staff, Marketing Director, Social Media Coordinator, CFO, so many of our team, corporate team here at Taffer got it. So we need to continue being safe, for sure. So how do we deal with these disappointments? For me, waiting for the vaccine was a disappointment. Getting the vaccine, candidly, Corey, was exciting when I got it, but it's sort of a disappointment now because having the vaccine isn't having the impact on my life that I thought it would.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not just walking back into the energy centers and the casinos. And so, that's a disappointment also. So you realize, shit, even post-vaccine, this thing goes on. It continues. And how do we deal with this level of disappointment and such? And, who do we talk to that can help us understand what we're feeling ourselves? And, for me, I trust Phil McGraw. And he's a special guy, and his knowledge is immense to me. So, I really wanted to have Phil back on the show now as vaccines are happening and we're still having heavy restrictions and heavy numbers to really talk about how we're dealing with all of this. And how do we position ourselves to really come back strongly? And when you think about Phil's background, I can think of nobody better to talk about this. Phil, in all disclosure, is my friend. But, Dr. Phil holds a doctorate in clinical psychology. When people say, he's not a doctor, he's blah, 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 blah. Phil, in his early career, first of all, he achieved a doctorate in clinical psychology and is quite good at it. He went then to work with his father and created a private psychology practice. In 85, McGraw and his father partnered with another person and created pathways, seminars, experience-based training, which allows individuals to achieve and create their own results. So in essence, a personal growth, self-help type of a program. A few years later, he sold his shares in that company for a bunch of money. In 1990, Phil McGraw co-founded a company called Courtroom Sciences, Inc., CSI, with another lawyer as a trial consulting firm which provides services in U.S. litigation psychology. Now, jury selection, trial consulting, witness training, and depositions. So CSI advised top trial lawyers, every major airline in the world, dozens of Fortune 500 companies, and Phil is no longer an active or director in a company. But the TV show Bull, if any of you have seen it, I believe it runs on CBS, is produced by Phil and Jay McGraw. But separate of that, it's biographical. It's about Phil's life when he was, in fact, a consultant, back when Phil was a consultant to attorneys. So when you think about his background and his education, the fact that he is clinically trained, the fact that he did have a personal practice and then moved to helping people grow and self-help, and then moved into trial consulting, and you think about that, he had to understand people well enough to know what a juror would do before the juror actually did it. Pretty amazing, Corey, right?
Wow, yeah.
So, in essence, what Phil's company did is they would do the various psychological research that was required, and they would determine how people would behave in certain situations, what information they could provide, what information they shouldn't, whether they be an open juror, a juror, or a biased juror, et cetera, et cetera. So his depth of understanding humanity is pretty powerful. And Phil is not only has that background, but he's my buddy, he's my friend. And both Phil and his son Jay are dear friends of mine. And always having him on this podcast is a pleasure. But, when Phil speaks, I listen. I listen for a few reasons. I listen because of his training. I listen because of his professional experience. And I listen because of who he is. Phil, it's a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the last time we were on the podcast together was back in April. which was a very different time than today. And, you know,
Very different.
and everybody's talking about the pandemic and effects of the pandemic. And you know, I had Dr. Ian Smith on from the Doctors a few podcasts ago. And of course, which you produce. And we were talking about New Year's resolutions and changing behavior and such. And I'm working on my new book, and you're going to get a kick out of this. And the name of the book is The Power of Conflict. And I'm analyzing the psychological and physiological impact of conflict. And I don't mean war conflict. I mean personal conflict and internal conflicts and how it affects us and the physiology in our lives. And I'm working on this book. And I'm talking about how doctors are telling me, researchers, of how when you hold internal conflict in, it has a negative impact on the physiological output and inputs of a brain. And I said, then they went further to say that's why psychiatry exists. And I went on this quest of thinking to myself, New Year's resolutions, pandemic, and then I look at your background, Phil, with CSI, when you were working on juries and on witnesses, and your job was to anticipate the behavior of people, in essence, right? And sort of forecast how people would behave in certain situations.
Exactly.
And those of you who haven't watched Bull on CBS, that is autobiographical, and that goes back to Phil's career in that business. So I have a really big question to ask you, Phil, that I've never asked you before, nor have I ever thought about. Are we all so predictable?
Well, it depends on it depends on a couple of things. One is what we're talking about, and two, how much information you have about a person. If you have enough information about a person and you're talking about a category of their life that is really important to them, then they do become predictable. And I'll give you an example. Let's talk about how a mother is going to react if someone is picking on, victimize, or threatening one of their children. Are mothers predictable? Yes, they're very predictable. So if you say, are we that predictable? There are certain things that are DNA instinctual within certain people and in certain situations that you can predict with a high degree of accuracy. But yet, can you predict which movie she's going to like? No. You can't predict something like that comes down to taste. But the more it means, the higher the stakes, the more predictable people become, because the more they have invested, the more you can predict how they're going to react to threat, conflict, attack, or whatever. And you're quite right about conflict. It's not only does it drain energy and erode physical health and promote disease and compromise immune systems, it's also experienced as very painful. And people like to get out of painful situations. And I used to always say to lawyers that we worked with, it's like people don't want to be in pain. And if you present one side of the case and the other lawyers present the other side of the case, and so these people are the rope in a tug of war, it's like being in the middle of a hot highway in Texas in the middle of August, barefooted. It's very painful to stand there. They're going to take a direction. They're going to go to one side of the road or the other as fast as they can. And if you get them over to your side, what's the chance that they're going to go back out onto that hot highway and go all the way over to the other side and experience the pain of that transition again? So you've got to get them early and get them to your side and then keep them there. So primacy is really important in resolving conflict. So that was very important to us when we were in jury. That's why everybody always, if you break a lamp, it's a foot race to mom. Who gets there first and has privacy? That's who's gonna win. He did it.
That's why I always got blamed for the lamp, Phil, I'm guessing. So,
you're too slow-footed, I guess.
I guess I was. So it's fascinating. So when I look at predictive behavior and try to understand that, okay, there are certain decisions, and I get what you're saying, compartmentalized parts of my life can be somewhat predictable.
Right.
And then, have you had a chance to see the movie Social Dilemma?
I have not seen it, but it's been recommended to me by many, many people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And in essence, what it is it's a summary of all these companies and all the data and information that they collect on us. And they're trying to be intuitive or predictive about our behavior, right? Or trying to manipulate. And the premise is if they can change our behavior by 1%, they can make billions of dollars on that 1% of change. Or if they can adapt better to our behavior. So what you're saying about predictability is when you were doing this in legal situations, you needed massive amounts of data to begin to even approach that kind of forecasting.
We did. So we would study a juror, and we wanted to know everything we could about them. What bumper stickers they had on their car, what kind of car they drove, what religion they were, pictures of their house to see was their lawn perfectly manicured with a little row of flowers in the front, or did it look like they hadn't had a mower in 6 months? How fastidious were they? Their political preferences. I mean, just everything, because it would tell you a lot about that person's value system. And people are products of their learning history. So how were they brought up? Were they brought up in a military home? Were they brought up with a single parent? Were they brought up in the inner city? Were they brought up on a farm? I mean, everything you could learn about them. And it wasn't just being able to predict how they would react to a situation, but it could tell you a lot about their symbol system and how they would hear you. Because it might be 1,000 facts in a case, but there would be a subset of 10 or 12 facts that, if arranged properly, would get you home. And you had to figure out what do they care about? Because let me tell you, if you're not going to win with the top 10 facts, the other 900 aren't going to get you there. What are the top 10 facts? And you got to get on that horse and ride it. And do they use feeling language? Do they use action language? Do they use cognitive language? What kind of words do they respond to? All sorts of things like that you listen for, and it tells you how to communicate with them.
It's interesting. When I watch you on Dr. Phil, I can see how you will handle different people in different ways. Even your pace changes. Sometimes you go at a quicker pace because I'm guessing a slower pace bores them. Sometimes you go at a slower pace because the quicker pace tends. But it's fascinating now that you say that, and I watch you work, how differently. And also your body language, when you choose to lean in, when you choose to lean back. So is that you consciously trying to figure out what is the best way to communicate with this person?
Well, it is.
It's conscious.
It is conscious because you want to make a connection, and people have different, there's a different language of love. There's a different language of conflict. People have different languages. And I think a good example is Robin and I could walk into a building, come out and describe the building, and you wouldn't know we had been in the same building. Because I would come out and say, well, it looks really solid. I think the beams are on 12-foot centers. I think it's got a really good foundation. I think there's a lot of light. It seems to be solid as a rock, good bones to me. She would come out and say, oh, I just think it's absolutely beautiful. The use of space was great. I mean, I love the way they transition from here to there. She would describe it aesthetically. I would describe it structurally. Same building, would have no idea we were both in the same space. Because she has an eye for one thing and I have an eye for another. So if you talk to me about the aesthetics, I would be like steer-headed, like, what? if I talk to her about the structure, she's like, I don't care about that. I want to know what I can do to make this a really comfortable place. So you've got to find out what's important to them and make sure you emphasize those things when you're communicating with that person. And I have to deal with that every day when I'm talking to somebody and trying to get them to move their position from what they've been doing to what I think is important for them to do.
We share something together, and maybe this is why, you and I have always connected from the first time we've met. We became friends right away. And
first minute.
and I look at when I try to deal with these people that I'm engaged with for the short period of time that I'm engaged with them like you are. And, I can sort of sense the ones that are changing in front of me, and I can sense the ones that aren't. Do you know that when you're finished with them? Can you turn around when you walk off stage? Do you know if it's really made an impact or not in real time?
I do. I do, and so do you. I see it. I watch you on Bar Rescue, for example, and I can see, I'm very visual. It's like I can see light bulbs coming on over their heads that you're talking to them or not. And, you get very confrontive with people sometimes, and it's interesting that you can get very confrontive with people and nobody's ever picked up a shovel and hit you in the head. And I'll tell you why. Because nobody can ever question that anybody has ever worked harder on their behalf than you're working for them. They may not like what you're saying, but they can never question your sincerity. And that's why they're willing to hear it from you. And that's very obvious when you go in there. You may confront them and tell them things they don't want to hear, but nobody could ever question your sincerity. And nobody, and I wish you had asked somebody sometime, has anybody ever worked harder for you than I, Jon Taffer, am working for you right now? And I'll bet you never get a no. Nobody's ever worked that hard for me.
We start shooting next week. I am going to use that line, so watch out for it. Phil,
I hope you do.
You have been not only a friend, but before I got to know you well personally, you were a mentor to me and always a great example to me. And I look at you've spent, I guess now it's probably more than $35 million helping people from the show and post-therapeutic and other support services and such for people. And,
Right.
Your authenticity and the fact that you care so much is what comes through. And I guess we have that in common. Go ahead, Phil, please. You were going to say something.
No, I think that's why I see that. I approach it that way, and I think that's why I see it in you. And let's face it, you don't need to be doing Bar Rescue. I'm not going to say too much, but you don't need to be doing anything. Exactly. I mean, we could both stay home and be potted plants, but we would probably go insane. But you quit working for money a long time ago. And so you're working for passion. And I see that. And I think others see that. I think that's why people respond to you the way they do.
Well, thank you, Phil. So as a mentor, and as one I've looked up to so much, when I think of the thousands of people that you've helped from all walks of life and the years of experience that you've had, and I'll never forget when we sat in your conference room and one day and you took out a piece of paper and you did that ladder graph for me. This is where you are in life. This is where I am in life. And I don't know if you remember that about the years that we've all had on this planet. When you look at what we're all going through today, what worries Dr. Phil?
I have two sons, and, I have grandchildren, and the thing that I guess keeps me from having complete peace is what kind of world I'm leaving behind for them. I used to measure my success or failure, at least in part, as to whether or not if I fell off the world tomorrow, I would do so knowing that my family was taken care of, that they would be okay, that they would never be hungry or cold or out on the street or whatever, that I had provided for them financially. But then as my sons grew up and have been very blessed financially because they're really smart and hard workers, and it's been they've been very fortunate.
In full disclosure, one is a partner of mine.
Yes, Jay. And you know how hardworking and smart Jay is, and so that's something I don't worry about anymore because I know they'll be just fine. But I want them to have the opportunity to be okay. I want them the opportunity to be able to really live out and enjoy their lives. And I hope we don't screw it up where they don't have a chance to. And toward that end, I tell both of them. Jordan was performing at Madison Square Garden. He was opening with the Jonas Brothers, and he was playing Madison Square Garden 2 nights in a row and the Hollywood Bowl 2 nights in a row. And I mean, who gets to do that? I mean, and then places just packed to the rafters, and he walks out on stage, and there's thousands of people down there, mostly girls, but thousands of people down there with Jordan T-shirts on and all of this. And I tell them, don't let this go by in a blur. Every once in a while, take a minute to stop, take a deep breath, look around, and say, wow, what an amazing experience. Take it all in, because you never know when you may come this way again. Take it all in, soak it up, really appreciate the moments that you have in your life, and don't just go get caught so in ascendancy that you're always climbing and never enjoying where you are. Take a minute to really appreciate this is a wow moment. This is a great time, because it's not the destination as much as it is the journey. And I've tried to tell them to take time to enjoy the journey, and I think they both do, and I do. I remind myself of that. I pull onto the Paramount lot, and I think, this is a great experience. It's wonderful, and I get to do a lot of things, and I really take a minute. I have a great degree of gratitude for the experiences that I get to have, the people I get to meet, the people I get to interview, the things that I get to do.
Well, in life we're provided with opportunities, but you have to step up, and you have to turn those into something to create that next opportunity. And you've mastered that so much. I enjoy listening to your mystery and murder analysis that you do, that podcast show that you do. And it's interesting, I get back to predictive behavior and stuff when you really pick apart how these people do. Boy, this is a loaded question, but I have to ask you this. Can prisoners really be reformed, violent prisoners, ones that have touched blood, so to speak?
I believe they can. Now, there are psychopaths, sociopaths, whatever you want to call them. We change the term every once in a while, but I think everybody knows what we mean when we say psychopathic killers and that sort of thing. There is a certain element of society that I believe is absolutely evil. And that's beyond pathology. I think they're just dark, evil people. And I have met some of those people, and I do believe there is that small percentage that are irredeemable. I think if you just said, you know what, we're going to wipe the slate clean, we're going to hit the reset button and give you a fresh start. You get a new identity, we're going to just drop you in a new city, no record, no history, no nothing. I believe they would be right back where they are in a matter of a few years. And I don't think there's anything that could change that. And that's the one diagnosis that tends to get worse with therapy instead of better. And I'll tell you why. Because in therapy, you teach them what they don't have. A true psychopath, a true sociopath, they don't have empathy. They don't have remorse for other people. And in therapy, they try to teach them that, and all they do is teach them how to mimic it, which makes them harder to pick out.
Teaches them how to hide it.
Yeah, they don't know how to reflect feelings. Somebody will come to work and say, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. My dog was run over in traffic today." A normal thinking, feeling person would go, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible. You must feel really bad." That's an empathetic response. A psychopath would go, "Oh, really? What kind of dog?" Because they have no ability to stand in their shoes and think what it must be like to lose something you love. But in therapy, you would teach them reflection of feeling. What you do is you reflect feeling. You go, this person's obviously hurting, so they must be experiencing bad feelings, so I need to ask about their feelings. You teach a psychopath that, it makes them harder to spot because you taught them. Now, it's just the tip of the iceberg. They don't know the second question, but you've at least taught them the first one. It makes them harder to spot.
Wow. So how has this year been tough for you? I know, this show shut down. You went back home. Then you worked, of course, online with it. What's been hard for you this year?
I think probably the hardest thing has been working in such a restrictive environment, and it's an environment that I agree with. It's not that I don't agree with it, it's just that it is very restrictive. I work in front of a live audience, and I haven't had an audience all year. And they're a barometer for me. I read them to see if I've made my point, if the pacing is right, if it's time to move on. I must
say, you've done a great job of it. And if people haven't watched Dr. Phil recently, you should, because it's a different challenge for you. But it's more revealing sometimes in conversation, dare I say.
Yeah.
I think it's...
Yeah, it's... people don't feel as... I think they feel that maybe it's more intimate without anybody there but just the two of us. And so they're maybe more forthcoming. Perhaps, but that's been difficult, and it's been difficult. We've respected the guidelines and restricted even being around family for a period of time, which we're very family oriented, so that was tough. Now, as time went on, we've kind of created a pod where we are around family because we know where they've been and they know where we've been, and so we've been able to spend time with them. But I think the restrictiveness is difficult on everyone, and that's made it more difficult. But I'm sure that's like everybody. The actual quarantine hasn't been all that bad for us because we're kind of homebodies anyway. So
me too. So I'm all over the place in today's interview. I'm getting to have fun with you, buddy. I'm getting to ask you questions that are sort of timely for me. So if I was a parent today of a 5th, 6th grader, 4th grader, 7th grader, and lost that year of school and lost this year of interaction, what are the kind of things that I can do as a parent now that things are starting to open up? And are you worried about that? And what are the kind of steps that a parent can take? Because I'm very worried about it personally.
Well, I think first off, I think we have to get the schools back open. And I'm not sure they ever should have closed, but people have I can argue both sides of that probably equally well. But I think we certainly need to get them back open as soon as we can do so safely. And it's not without risk. I certainly acknowledge that it's not without risk, but the price of having those schools closed, if you're a parent of a lower school child, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, the primary grades, it's really tough. 4, 5, and 6 is a little bit different, but I think the toll it's taking on these children is really great in terms of development, social development, because they're not doing the transactional work that you do interpersonally. They're not negotiating, they're not competing, they're not interacting, and that their development is arrested. And that's a gap that some research suggests will never be closed.
Because that window only lasts so long in their development.
Right. And the sooner we get back, the less the gap will be. But there have been studies done where kids have been out of school for a year and a half and then gone back, and you look at their earnings and their achievement in life, their adjustments emotionally, they just never got back to their peers that didn't have that interruption during those first through sixth grade years. So I think it's, if I was a parent of a school-aged child right now, I would really be working to watch for them having a pain of adjustment as they got back into the swing of things, and be really plugged in and supportive of them making that adjustment. Because I think when the doors open, it's not going to be like a pent-up appetite where everybody rushes back out there and dives into the world. I think they're going to tiptoe back out, and a lot of things that were taken for granted are going to be intimidating, particularly to children as they go back out there. And I think we're going to have to support them and encourage them and really work with them to kind of get back up to speed.
So you've done now, what, 9 bestsellers? 9 number one bestsellers?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think it's 9. So you've done 9 bestsellers. So you've got that pretty much buttoned up. Nobody can touch you in book sales. You've got the number one daytime TV show. You've had it for God knows how long, Phil. You're just unstoppable. Your podcast is, 2 of them are also unstoppable. You launch a podcast, you're number one. You come out of the gate number one. And, you know, I know your family. I know how much it all is to you. And are you ever going to slow down, or do you love what you're doing so much that you couldn't imagine not doing it?
Well, you know, I'm very curious, John. I'm very, very curious. And I think when you're curious, and particularly when I know what my lane is. You know, my lane is human functioning. You're not ever going to hear me doing a math tutorial. You're not ever going to hear me telling you what to do with your 401k. Nobody's ever heard me talking about those things. I stay in my lane, but it's a broad lane because human functioning is a broad area. But I'm very, very curious about why people do what they do and don't do what they don't do. Since I was 12 years old, I have been absolutely fascinated about that. And when you stop and think about it, isn't that interesting? When you think about why people do the things they do and don't do the things they don't do, to me, that is a puzzle that is so intriguing that anything I can do that's a different way to come at that puzzle. I have a new primetime show that's starting on CBS this summer that we start shooting like next week, I think, or the week after. That's called House Calls, where I'm doing some family interventions in people's homes.
That's exciting.
It's very exciting to me because, you know, on Dr. Phil, I do 175 originals a year. And here we're just going to do 1 per week. And so we maybe do like 20 a year. So I get to go much more in depth and really try to figure out some of the big issues facing American families today, because I think American families are under attack. And so I get to really dig into that, and I'm really curious. So I think as long as I'm curious, I'll keep doing things. If I ever stop being curious, then I guess I would start playing more golf and tennis or something. I don't know.
You know, it's funny. I should have been a psychiatrist because when I went to college, I studied cultural anthropology. And I really got into cultural anthropology and the study of primates, right, and why we do the things that we do. And certain things haunt me, Phil. For example, according to the American Council of Shopping Centers, 70% of people that walk into a mall make a right-hand turn.
Really?
Phil, that bothers the hell out of me. I mean, I can't understand how, but that is a statistic from them. So I, as a consumer psychologist, if I can use such a term, I try to change consumer behavior. I'm the guy trying to get them to make a left. So does brighter lighting do it? Maybe sometimes. Will a wider hallway do it? Maybe once in a while. One is carpet, the other doesn't. But you can never much change that statistic. And, you know, that's why I was having fun with you about, you know, how predictive are we as human beings? And I guess certain things were just darn predictive about it. And
yeah, there are just certain things. And see, that's the kind of thing that if you study that and know it, it's a powerful piece of information, even though you may not know why.
Right.
You know, we would do mock trials sometimes where we would mock try a case 6-8 times before the actual trial, and we would run through maybe 400 jurors. And we would find out that maybe 35-year-old women with 2.2 kids, a barking dog, Baptist with a husband that didn't graduate college or whatever, voted against us every time. I mean, like 94% of the time they voted against us no matter what we did. We didn't know why, but it didn't matter. You get them off the jury if you have to call in a bomb scare. You get them off the jury. You don't know why they vote against you every time. You just know that they do. And it's like you're saying, if 70% of the people make a right turn, you don't need to know why. You just need to know that they do.
And you want the space on the right corner is what you want. You don't want the one on the left side.
Exactly. I want the space on the right.
And typically, by the way, the space on the right costs more to rent than the space on the left, believe it or not, because the landlord knows that too.
And
anyway,
so apparently they found that out.
They sure did. So, Phil, you know, it's been fun talking to you, especially in sort of a casual way like we get to do together. And, you know, I hope that post-COVID we can get together, you know, Robin, you, Nicole, and I, and have some dinner soon, because I love our time together, my friend.
Well, I really do too, and just, John, congratulations on all your success. And you know, you're into so many different things that aren't visible to the rest of the world. That makes me know you're as curious as I am, and you do different things. And you're a hard worker, and just congratulations on all your success. You deserve every bit of it. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Thank you, buddy. I feel exactly the same way. Send my love to Robin, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Look forward to it. Take care.
Bye-bye, buddy.
All right.
All righty. Well, I am back. Well, thank you, Dr. Phil McGraw, for being here. For those of you who don't know, Jay McGraw, Phil's son, is my partner in Taffer Mixology. And if you haven't tried our Bloody Mary mix or our Margarita mix, they're available in Walmarts and a lot of other retailers across the country. You really should. We worked really hard on them. I'm really, really proud of them. And you can get more information at taffersmix.com, taffersmix.com. And if you haven't tried our seltzer, that too is now in 17 states all over the country. And I'm really, really proud of it. You know what's interesting about seltzer? People aren't loyal to brands as much as they're loyal to flavors. If you like black cherry, you'll get a black cherry regardless of what brand it is. If you like grapefruit, you'll get a grapefruit. So people pick flavors. So I worked really, really hard on the seltzer flavors. I'm really proud of them. So if you haven't tried them, get a chance to do that, please do so. I got to go work on my book, and we're starting Bar Rescue next week. So podcast is now monthly. I'll talk to you guys next month, and I'll have, 3 or 4 bar rescues under my belt, so I'll have a lot to talk about then. Take care, everybody. If you like watching the Jon Taffer Podcast, click here to subscribe for more, or click here to watch the next one.